Hello and welcome to another edition of the KOPE Life Podcast interview series. This is part two of Heather Gotti's. Her story is just amazing. She's waiting virtually backstage, and I'm about to bring her up, and I'm so excited. Um, I see Benita. You said hi. Hello, Benita. It is good to see you. Thank you for joining us. And I'm just going to jump right on in.
Hi.
Hello. I was
I
about to
look,
say good morning. It's a good afternoon. How are you doing?
it is afternoon. I'm great. So I'm sitting on the floor in my closet. I'm really sweaty and gross and didn't want to sit on my couch. So don't mind that.
It's just really it's just an example of who you are, always on the go.
Always.
I've actually, I mean, that's one of the things I first noticed about you. I think our first conversation was maybe a year and a half ago, or almost a year ago, and back then you worked out 8 times a day, had a job, were going to school full time.
Yes.
There's a lot going
Still do
on.
all the things, but I work out like once a day now. So
Okay. Man, well, I mean, I'm just saying that to say that you are really an inspiration and a motivation, and I appreciate you.
thank you.
So, so I reached out to see who would like to be a podcast guest, and you said you'd like to have a part two. So, and really, I'm excited for that. But what I wanted to do is I want to kind of recap what I remember from part one.
Okay.
And so, what I remember is you talked about feeling like you had hit rock bottom. So there was a moment where you were on the phone, you were stressed out, you were like a shell of yourself, and you were on the phone listening to events involving your brother.
Yeah.
And so then you began to do some counseling, but you weren't all in on the counseling.
No,
And
I was
then
doing it just to say I was doing it.
right, right. And you recognize that about yourself. But
Absolutely.
then as you were going through those motions, because you recognized that it was time for a change, then you had the accident, and then it was like, I think the way I described it was you thought you had hit rock bottom, you were trying to climb out, and then you realized that you could fall further, and you did.
Right.
You went from there to where you are now. And it's really impressive, for those people who didn't watch the first episode or don't know you, you are an intel analyst for the United States Air Force. You are a technical sergeant in a master sergeant billet, senior enlisted leader. And really, that means that I'm not the only one that has the privilege of looking up to you, but that's okay. I don't mind. Um, so what I would like to do is, first of all, I really just want to open it up to you, and you can start with whatever you want to start with. Talk about
Okay.
yourself. Talk about what's next. Like this is this is
So
your
I'll just
show.
prereq that my 4-year-old's home today because apparently his daycare is closed on Fridays now. So if any shenanigans happens in the background, it's okay. We're just let it go. um,
I'm okay with that.
so I did reach out to you. I actually went back and rewatched my episode because I decided to share it with the airmen that work for me. So they can kind of have like a behind the scenes look of this is who I am and where I come from. So when I talk to them, a lot of things like I genuinely can relate to them. I've been in their shoes, I've been an airman, I've gone through the struggle. So I wanted I think vulnerability is important as a leader. And then being able to be vulnerable in front of others it's different. So I shared it with them. I ended Someone asked me a question and I was like, wait, did I talk about that? So I went back and I watched it and I was like, oh, I did. Um, and I I felt like watching my episode, like I didn't I focused heavy on the mental health part. But like I like breezed over like the parts that got me there. Like, yes, it just sounded like I had a bad day at work or oh my job's tough. And that's not at all what got me there. Those were like that was like the tip of the iceberg. And there was like so much underneath and years of trauma that I did not realize. And that even now I'm still like realizing like this is a trauma response. This is not a logical, well thought out response to these things. And not all responses have to be thought out, right? But so I reached out. I was like, "Hey, I've been through more than just a bad day at work and not liking my boss." So yeah, I I wanted to elaborate more on that. So, knowing that I was going to talk today, last night I was like, "Man, what am I going to talk about?" Right? Like I can talk about so much. And I actually decided I'm going to talk about things from my childhood, and I have never openly discuss these things. And I'm doing that because this is actually a part of who I am largely as a whole. I was talking to a mentor slash friend. She was my old supervisor yesterday about things that were bothering me currently. And I realized that these things, like the person I am now, is a direct reflection of the things that happened in my childhood, but I'm choosing to not be that. So I'm fighting so hard to not be this person that's where I am now. And I say all that to say, um, so my mother had me young, and had my brother young. She had me at 16. So my father was older. And when they split up, my father got custody of us because he had a house. He was, he was considered stable in the court's eyes, whereas my mother was still a minor and was not. So my dad married a woman that became my first stepmother.
Can I interrupt
Uh,
you for a second here? I
okay.
I just want to say a couple things. First of all, I'm I'm in awe of you for wanting to come back and be more vulnerable.
Oh, it's
This
thanks.
that is, I'm in awe of you for that, for setting the example, right? Of really what it means to really just dig deep into who you really are. But I also want to say that in the first podcast, you didn't share everything, and that's okay, right? A lot of our boundaries and barriers are subconscious, because you were protecting yourself. It wasn't even about us. And the last thing I want to say is that, when we feel some real powerful emotions, like in the next hour, it's okay if we pause and catch our breath,
Okay, great.
right? Like, you don't owe us anything, and if you want to pause, if you start to say something and change your mind, like, you can say the words, "No, I'm not telling you that."
Never
Like,
mind.
that's okay. That's okay, but, like, it's our emotions are real, and so don't force anything on yourself. You need to stop, catch your breath, take a breather, um, do that.
Okay.
Do that, right? That's what I want you to do. I don't want you to break yourself down. I want
I don't
to
think I don't think
support
I'll
you and
break, but
encourage you.
the emotions are definitely at the top because I'm going through a situation with my father right now. It's really not even a situation. Like, my long story short, my father chose work and drinking and women over his children. It just is what it is. Looking back now, I can see that it was not that I wasn't a good enough child or I wasn't important enough. Like, my children, I spoke on the last podcast, my children are my world. They are what have saved me and what have kept me going. And I just was not that for him. That doesn't make me less of a person. That took a long time for me to cope with. I am 32 years old, and I with quote unquote dad issues. Because while dealing with emotional intelligence and self-love, that's one part that I never wanted to touch because I struggled with it for so long. Like, why was I just not enough for him? And even at 31, I felt myself still trying to fight for his love or show my accomplishments or like be all these things, and still now it's just not enough. And we got into an argument. The I did that one talk show where I was in the gym. And after that, we were fighting, and he was like, "Just don't ever talk to me again." And in theory, that shouldn't have bothered me, right? Like he's never been there. I've always like it's always been a one-sided relationship. And he told me that, and I couldn't work out. I had to leave the gym. I started crying, and I'm like, why does this hurt so much? So that's actually why I decided to talk about it now, because talking about it with a therapist helps. Talking about it and being vulnerable helps, and talking through it with you, I feel like I come to more realizations about things. So
Let
that's
me ask.
okay.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
No, you're
let me
fine.
ask you. I just want to ask you this question though. You said it hurt to hear those words,
Yeah.
and then you said, "Why did it hurt me that way?"
Bother me.
Have you? And so my answer to that is because he's your father. That's why it hurt.
Absolutely. Right.
But have you been able to reconcile that and work through that specific thought? Because what I, what I what I don't like to see is for us to have certain emotions and then judge ourselves like, oh, that hurt so bad. What's wrong with me for hurting? And the answer is nothing's wrong with you. And I bet that you've said that to a lot of other people.
So
So,
I'm definitely still working through that.
okay.
And I'm not making the progress that I think that I want to make, because I think I put a lot of pressure on myself to like just get over it or just work through it and it's fine. I'm definitely in like the anger phase right now. Where I'm mad. Like, how dare you tell me not to speak to you again? Um, if anything, you should be fighting for the relationship with me. But instead it's always been the other way around, and then it's almost childish, like, no, you don't get to tell me that. I want to tell you that. But I don't. Like, I wanted that relationship for a long time, but it's come to a point where that relationship genuinely doesn't bring positive things to my life, and it never has. I just wanted to hold on to it because he was my father. Um, and that's just it. This all really came to blow because my grandparents, like, I grew up with them. My grandparents, they're my world. Um, my grandfather like taught me to hunt and fish and like raised me, and I spent a lot of time with them. And my father, this will tell you the caliber of person he is. My father beat my grandfather about a month ago. So I get off work, I come to the car, and I have text from my cousin, like pictures of my grandfather. Um, and she's like, this is what happened. And I'm like, what happened to him? Had no idea at the time it was my father. So then I find out it was my father. And I'm like, now I'm put in a position where the person that I want to have a relationship physically harmed and beat my grandfather. And I was like, that's it. This is it for me. I don't know what it was going to take, but this is it for me. So I made the police report. I called the sheriff. I had him arrested. That was tough, right?
Yeah, and again, take your time and breathe.
Yeah.
Take your time and
So
breathe.
I have him arrested. I
Yes.
I pressed the charges. I contacted like adult protective services, right? I'm in Maryland, they're in Texas. I can really only do so much from here. But I did all I knew to do. I called adult protective services. I got them involved. My father lives on their property in a camper. Um, so every ounce of me wanted to drive to Texas and hook up to that RV and like drag it off their property, right? But I had to be rational. Like, there's going to have to be a legal process that takes care of those issues. My instinct and anger can't. It just is what it is. So I like got my grandfather to the hospital, evaluated, everything is what it is. At this point, I have not spoken to my father. I, I didn't want to speak to him. Um, so my grandmother and I FaceTime all the time. Like, she always jokes that I'm always eating or cooking, and I'm just like, Grandma, This is the time of day you call me. But I was talking to her and my dad was in the living room and I did not know that he was back at the time. So I hear him in the background and I'm like, hey, grandma, I'm just going to talk to you later because I don't want to put my grandmother in the middle of my father and I. Because as my grandmother, she wants us to have a relationship. And I think since that's her son, she always is like, well, you know how he is. And I'm like, okay, so you're making an excuse. Yeah, I know how he is. But him and I started arguing through FaceTime. And I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely not doing this with my grandmother. I was like, Grandma, I love you. I'll talk to you later. I hang up. Well, then he texted me when I was in the gym. And tried to I think what made me so angry is he tried to validate what he did. And I'm like, I don't want to hear it. Like, at no point should you have done that. And I will never say it's okay because it's not what you did to my grandfather. And I told him, like, honestly, I don't want to talk about it with you. Like, you can go through this process with the court. Whatever happens is going to happen. I don't even want to hear because I can tell that you're not sorry. I don't want to hear from you. And I just wanted it to be done. I still couldn't even process and talk about that happening to my grandfather. Especially to the person that had did it, who coincidentally was my father, right? So he continues to still text me. He's definitely talking out of anger and a place of hatred. I think I can give my diagnosis on why he is the way he is, right? But all the things that he's saying and attacking me with, the one thing was never speak to me again. And then I'm like, at this point, I'm okay with that. I'm going to be okay with that because I want to support my grandfather and making sure he's no longer around, which means to do that, I need to not have a relationship with you, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. And then Monday, like 4 days ago, I find out that somehow my grandfather is in a mental hold. My father has gotten him placed into a hospital for mentally ill elderly persons. And I have the medical power of attorney. So I'm like, how is this? I call, they won't tell me anything. And I'm like, I have the medical power of attorney. I'm the one that gets to make these decisions for my grandfather. I need to know what's happened. They won't tell me anything. So I call Adult Protective Services and I'm like, hey, my grandfather is here. Do you know why? Like, did y'all have him put here? And they're like, no. So they're supposed to be calling to find out why. I decided to block my father because it was best for me on all social media platforms. I did not delete and block his number because I always thought, like, what if he tries to contact me? So when this happened, I decided to delete and block his number. And I still, like, even right now, like, I'm just like, I still just can't believe, like, I can't believe he would do that. I can't believe he would still take it further and have him placed in a mental hospital. I can't believe that he would say those things to me and then not reach out to try to apologize. And in there, I texted him and told him, like, I don't hate you because I don't. I can't understand your thought rationale and it's hurtful to me and I don't want to understand it and you're not sorry. And I didn't say anything hateful to him or rude and he still, like, I felt he told me not, if nothing was going on that affected him or his youngest daughter, because he has 6 or 7 kids, his youngest daughter, who's my daughter's age, if it didn't pertain to him or her, he didn't want to hear about it. And I told him, like, as a parent, I could never imagine telling one of my kids that only the other one mattered. So I told him, like, I can't understand why you are this way. And because of that, I have to distance myself. That is what's going to be best until we can talk on level terms. But I think a lot of work has to happen on his end before he's going to even say okay to that. But even then, like, I'm pouring all this into him and he's just like, no response, don't care, liked the message. And I'm like, wow, like, here I am again, once again, almost at 32, still, like, trying to fight for a relationship that's never going to prosper at this point. Like, I'm going to continue to pour into that. And I think looking back, that's what I still was doing, which is a toxic, not a toxic trait, but a trait that got me into a place, into a bad place, was still like constantly giving and giving and giving and leaving myself with nothing in the hopes that someone else would see my worth. But I now know my worth. Like, I know I deserve to be happy. I deserve to be loved. I deserve for the people around me to care about me just as much as I care about them. And if he's not one of those people, then he has to go. I let his behavior and manipulation and abuse affect me and my thought process to becoming an adult. Like, I can't, now that I'm here, I can't let him take me back. And I was kind of doing that the past few weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, there went the ninja.
Wow, that's I mean, that's a lot. What I think about is when we desire that relationship, right? You want that relationship with him. I love the little ones. So every time he rolls by, like I'm gonna smile about it because I love the
Yeah.
little ones. But I think about a lot of times how we try to, and this can be in regards to your kids, your parents, your husband, your wife, whoever, where you don't just want their love, but you want them to be a specific kind of person. So you almost want love from your version of them as opposed to who they really are.
And I I think that with that, like wanting, it's like I want him to be more than he wants for himself too. Um, my other brother uh is a drug addict, and I will probably never get to know him again as sober. I know that I would do anything to get him there, but he has to want it for himself, right? Um, so it's, for a long time I went through that vicious cycle of trying so hard to just hold on to what I wanted him to be, to now understanding like this mental illness and this addiction keeps him from wanting the sober life. And I can't love the thought of who he could be. Like, I just have to love him for who he is right now. And I have to love him from afar, because I continue to only hurt myself, because it's another situation where like I'm putting everything into a relationship, not in a negative way, but I was always like reaching out, trying to ask where he is, what is he doing, does he need anything, and I was doing that because I wanted to take care of him. But it was like 2 or 3 months ago, he told me, he was like, "You're the only person that talks to me. You always want to know how I am. Like, I'm good with just regular conversations too, if you want to have those with me." And I'm like, dang, like he's right. I don't, he is still a person. Like, I see him as the drug addict, but I want him to be the person. He's like, "Thank you for still talking to me. Like, I want to talk about you too. Like, don't always check in on me." So yeah, I definitely recognize that I kind of pour a lot of myself into the relationships, and I'm thankful that I'm now into a place where like I'm pouring that same amount into myself.
I
'Cause I
love that. I
yeah.
love that. I mean, I know when we talked a year ago and 6 months ago, right? Um, what you were pouring into other people is obvious because you've always been that way. You've always had so much to give. Um, and so for you to be that way, like for me personally, I'm thinking, I hope you never change. Like I want what you want. I want you to be appreciated. I want your efforts to show some kind of results. But if you if you spend your life giving to others, pouring into others, and you don't get out of it what you want, it's still a life worth living because it came from your heart and who you are. It's a reflection of your character, not them. And so you're so full of love and just so full of like compassion. And the truth is, I'll tell you this, is that regardless of what any of these other people do in response to you, your kids can see and feel that love and compassion. you are setting an example for them of this is the kind of person, right? So it's not about, oh, I want to do this like mommy does it. It's I want to be the kind of person that mommy is. So I love these things about you. I hope you never change. And I just believe that the value of your effort, even though you can't see it or feel it right now the way that you want to, like, don't ever judge yourself. Don't ever look at yourself like, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that. Like, no regrets, no judgment. You're coming from your hearts. And most people are too afraid to do what you've already done. I appreciate you so much. I'm gonna try not to spend half hour talking about how amazing you are. But that's my perspective on it because like I've said this many times that you are amazing and I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thanks. And I I think that my father, like the thing happening the few weeks ago where I was like, why does this hurt? Is like the first real tough thing that I face tough things every day, right? Like I remind myself every day I can do tough things, I can do hard things, I can make it. I'm fierce, especially like going to work. Like I'm filling three people's positions and I'm one person and every day is exhausting. Like I know I'm capable, but it was like the first thing that like made me take a step back and almost check myself. Like, no, you are not less than because he just said that to you. Like that, I think this is like the longest time spent since I've had surgery. That I'm like reassuring myself almost like, no, you've come this far. You didn't come this far to just come this far. You're not going to let him take you back because he absolutely did. And I think I struggle so much with that because I'm just like the type of person that he is, the fact that he can still bring me back like that. Like I don't want that. I also don't want like the trauma and the things to like make me a hard person, right? Like I still want to be loving and caring and I my response to that was almost to just try to be numb. Like don't feel that, just be numb and that's really not who I want to be. But it just seems so much easier to just be like I don't care, whatever, be a trashy person. You're not going to affect me because look how much better of a person I am when really I'm not that much better. I just learned to love myself and appreciate things that he is not, and I don't think he's ever really going to. But yeah. And like in the beginning when I said like the person that I feel like I am now is only a reflection of genuinely my childhood because I'm just trying so hard to not I know the things that I don't want to do or things that I don't want to be or the people I don't want to reflect. Like I'm literally a Casa worker because I never want a child to have to sit in front of someone that has abused them or neglected them and say that in court, right? Like I had to go through that. I I had to sit there and tell the judge like, no, we actually cleaned our house for 3 days before the CPS work came over. Like we normally have maggots in our dishes in the sink. And seeing like my stepmother and father sitting there at the time, it was absolutely terrifying. Like knowing I'm gonna leave this courtroom and I'm probably gonna be beat for saying that. Like that was I don't want a child to go through that. And now being a CASA, like man, I if I could get paid for doing that, I would walk away from my 6-digit job that I could potentially have because I love it. I love being able to protect those kids and save them is what it feels like, right? Like I'm saving those kids who can't save themselves and they really don't have anyone else to do it for them. I think that's still like my positive way of like trying to like be like, yeah, you went through all these hard things, but look what but genuinely I take a step back and I look at what's come from that. Like I'm not an abusive parent because I had an abusive parent. Like I'm a more loving and involved parent because of that. But I think I've gotten into dangerous territory with that because I almost want to be like, it's okay those things happen because look at what you did. But it's really not okay. Like it's not okay that people go through that. It's not okay that I allowed my father to manipulate me that way for so long. It's not okay that he abused me. It's not okay that there was sexual abuse and trauma. Like those things are just not okay. And I think I tried to tell myself it was for a long time. And now dealing with his hurt, it's like bringing it all back. which
Yeah.
sucks. But I have a therapist and I talk to people like you, so it's gonna be okay.
Well, we can definitely talk more often. I would love to just be there to support and encourage you more often. I think about when you're talking about how these things are not okay. I think a lot of times you got to look at what are we assigning that to, right? So, for example, it's not okay that those things happened, but it's okay that you haven't completely healed. It's okay that you're still going through the process. It's okay for you to not be perfect and to say it's because of that, but I'm doing my best and I'm getting better, right? And so those events are not okay, but we're not going to use those events to judge anything outside of that. It's not okay that that happened to you, but it is okay that you have not fully recovered and gone on and become, an astronaut or the president or something. It's okay. It's okay that you can. It's okay that you can look at what you're doing as a casa and accept that some things didn't go the way that you wanted to, because you have the ability to bring love and compassion and continue to fight on. And so, regardless of what happened in the past that is not okay, we're not going to use the past to judge ourselves. And so I don't want people like you and the children that you help to ever look at themselves and say, what's wrong with me? How come it still hurts? Why haven't I gotten over it? How come I haven't healed? Because the answer is because you're human.
Yeah, there's that. That
Yeah,
one.
yeah, and so that's the answer. And it's like, if there's a memory, if there's something that comes to the forefront of your mind out of the blue and it kind of breaks you down, like that's okay. That's okay because that's your body remembering the trauma. And I say that because one thing that we don't know as leaders, as friends, as siblings, one thing that we don't know is the list of trauma that other people have gone through. But by you sharing what you're sharing today, people will know what you've been through. And so then when people at your job are feeling a certain way, they don't have to say anything to you for you to be their role model, for you to be their inspiration. But they see you and like that's okay.
Yeah. So I I'm glad you said that because I think like the comment I'm a work in progress. And I really like the last 2 weeks, like I was going through like really internal reflection, like I don't want this sounds so terrible. I don't want my father to be able to take any credit for the person that I am. Like I don't want him to think that, oh, this great person because he was so terrible. And I only say that because I heard him try to justify what he did to my grandfather and why it was okay. And I'm like, I don't want you to try to ever do that for me. And it's kind of like a pride thing, I think, with me. Like, I don't want you to ever be able to take credit for the person that I am because you really had nothing to do with it. That's my grandparents and my mother. Like, so I think there's definitely anger there. And that's also like a new emotion for it. Because I think I've spent so long being hurt. First, I spent so long neglecting it. And then I spent time being hurt and trying to be numb. And now I'm just like, I'm not mad that it happened. I'm mad that he still has that control over me to still draw out those emotions. And I think it's more pride. Like, right? Like
Yeah.
I still have a lot of like self awareness with situations, which is what I said. Like some of the things, like I have an initial reaction, and then I'm like, okay, but why am I having this reaction? Why do I feel this way? And that's definitely not like a a why, what is wrong, but like what is this emotion really being stemmed from? And like the when I said like how dare him tell me not to talk to him? Who does he think he is? Like why would he say that to me? I don't think that I'm less than, so I didn't like internalize it that way, but like he really just does not see the type of person that he is. But I think he knows that he still has that control, or he still knows that it bothers me. Because if it didn't bother me, I wouldn't have kept reaching out for all the years that I have. Like just trying to seek any validation from him.
right.
Which
But when
sounds
we
so
talk
pathetic. Like I don't know.
did
I can
you
like go back and forth with it forever, which is not good.
did you just call yourself pathetic?
Yeah.
Look, I'm gonna quote Black Panther. We don't do that here.
We don't do that here.
Don't do that here. Wow, yeah, we don't no, there's nothing pathetic about it. In fact, like I feel like and maybe it's not always easy to see in the moment, but like you feeling anger is progress. Because the truth is maybe that anger's always been there and you finally allowed it to surface. Because part of suppressing emotions is you saying, "Well, I shouldn't be angry," or maybe being angry because our emotions communicate to us, right? Like the reason we feel fear is not because something's wrong with us, it's because it's our emotions informing us that maybe there's a threat, right? And same thing with sadness. And so when you feel anger, that was finally that part of you that says, I have been done wronged. Like I have been wronged and I should not have been. And the anger is part of accepting that. And the anger, because the trauma that happened to you happened to your body. It wasn't just him feeding you bad thoughts. The whole person is traumatized. You're right. When they say it's all in the mind, well, that's not true. So the whole person is traumatized. And this is the whole person sending a message back to the brain. You can be angry because you've been done wrong and you deserve better. And that's your anger is part of you acknowledging who you really are. I'm about to get fired up. So
I I definitely think that like realizing like there's anger with it, like I definitely feel better. Like I feel like I'm definitely processing it more. Um I think the person that I am, like I don't want to be angry, but I definitely like there are some things that I've dealt with that have absolutely like made me angry. Um and like the last podcast how I said like, you know, I was going through the mental health things and a reaction to that was anger. Like I think it was a different it's a different type of anger. Like with this, yes, I was done wrong. And with the depression, I was angry because nothing felt like it was going right. So I was angry at myself. I, I'm learning a lot about emotions and the different reactions to them. But it doesn't mean it's not exhausting, right? Like after the last podcast, I literally like hung up and sprinted into the bowling alley because the people that work for me, we were doing a going away for someone else, and like emotionally, I was drained after that podcast. But I'm thankful that I do talk about it because, like you said, I don't really know too many people that have gone through hard things that willingly talk about it. And it took one person like posting on Instagram or Facebook and talk about their troubles where I'm like, oh, so we talk about it. That does it actually help? Do you actually feel better? Yeah, so I think really recognizing that I have been through a lot and it's not easy and it is something that would affect most people, right? Like I'm nothing's actually wrong with me. I've just gone through a lot, which led up to the depression because I wasn't dealing with any of it. I really just didn't know how to deal with it. When I look back, like I was raised with love by my grandparents, but when you think about like a grandparents type of love, it's like the nurturing, protective, but they didn't really like teach me life lessons. They just loved me. And I thought like, yeah, I have a terrible dad, but look at all the love I get from my grandparents. And then I moved in with my mother when I was a freshman in high school. Um, and like we always had a relationship, but that's like really when our relationship we got a good bond was when I was in high school. But I was already a teenager. Like I think that all the things from my childhood had already set the stage for the person I was going to be. Like I was going to be a loving person because I that's all I had known. Um, but then I lived with my mom, and I watched her go through like a really bad marriage, like being taken advantage of and not abused, but used absolutely. Which I think that I turned around and accepted. in my first marriage. Not a lot of people know that I was married before, but I accepted that also as my first marriage. But I can see now like the things that like I almost allowed because it happened when I was younger. And then working where I worked prior to the job now, like I didn't let him, like he had positional authority over me, so he was going to do it regardless. But it was allowed for him to treat me the way he treated me and talk to me the way he talked to me until I hit that point where I was like, no, now I'm mad. Now you're going to stop talking to me like this. Now I'm angry. And that was definitely the emotion that was like at the forefront. That was like, no, we're done taking this. And I stood up for myself. Of course, they came with repercussions, but I'm great with those repercussions because I'm in such a better place now, work wise too, than I was. He thought he was doing himself a favor by getting rid of me, but it it it's been amazing. Like I was literally told, like, you're gonna leave here and your career is gonna stall because you need to choose between being a tech sergeant and a mother because you can't do both. I'm like, what? And now, if I could just like rub it in his face, like, look at me. I came to the shop and I worked for a captain and a master sergeant, and then there was a tech sergeant. And now I'm the tech sergeant that's running the entire show. I don't have a captain or a master sergeant helping me. It's just me doing it all by myself. Whose career is stalling, right? I definitely still have emotions with that.
Yeah.
Anger's not one of them anymore, but it sucks that it's almost like I had to go through that again to stand up for myself. I had to deal with being mistreated and getting to the point that I was angry before I stood up for myself and before I realized like just how much I had allowed to stay in. Like I bottled it all up. I let the verbal abuse and the toxic work center happen for a long time before I finally had enough. But it was when he attacked me as a mother that I was absolutely like, no, that's the one thing that no one can ever take from me. Like, you will not tell me that I have to choose, and you will not tell me that I'm not a good mother. You don't get that. Like,
Yeah,
I
it's
hold it close, like, you know, uh-uh. Now we'll fight. You abused me, but now you came at me as a mother, which makes me think like you would you're me as a mother. If it's not off limits, then my kids wouldn't have been off limits, and that's my job to protect them. So the
uh,
mama bear in me is like really strong.
well, that's good, and I'm glad. I'm happy about that. I've
Yeah.
heard that, our strongest boundaries are the things that we're most compassionate about.
Oh, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
And but with you talking about what you endured as a child and then your first marriage and then the work center, I think a lot of times when we look at our worth and our value, we can assign ourselves worth in different areas of our lives. So it's like, okay, I didn't deserve that as a child, but I don't know what I'm worth as a tech sergeant. I don't deserve this at work, but I'm not sure what I should put up with at home. And what happens, going back to boundaries, is when you begin to realize that your value it cannot be impacted that way by the external events. It's
Correct.
from the inside. And I feel like that's what really enabled you to say, you know, I'm gonna give you a quote, right? This is a quote my brother told me a long time ago. My older brother, he said to me, he said, at some point in time, after your 30th birthday, you're gonna wake up, you're gonna look around, and you're gonna say, I ain't putting up with this shit no more.
I did that. I
Yes.
and like I when I started actually like working on myself, one of the big things that I had to like tell myself is like I'm not purposely putting myself in these positions. Like it seems like I keep getting in these positions where I have to not have a knee jerk reaction, but where I have to fight to get out of them. And I'm like, how does this keep happening to me? How do I keep ending up in these positions? Like my 12-year military career, like I could have an hour talk about everything that I've had to do like everything that I went through as a cop, being sexually assaulted twice, like losing rank. Like why is my life chaotic? It feels like, but but like you said, like my worth is not subjective to the things that can affect me. Like my worth stays the same and consistent. And it took that, like understanding at the very beginning, like those things don't make me who I am. They don't determine my worth. Like I get to decide what I'm worth. I get to decide how much I love myself. I cannot let them decide for me. And the day that I stood up to the at work, I remember like making my coffee that morning, like today's the day. We're not taking shit. Like words of affirmation to myself, like you are strong, you are powerful, you are not taking his shit today. Today, when he comes at you, because he's gonna do it, he does it every day. The the moment he says something, you're putting him in his place. Forget the UCMJ, forget the surroundings. Like, no, he's gonna know that he has effed with the wrong person. Today's the day. And I think that I was a little sleep deprived because Cash was like really sick at the time, and that was like beginning middle of COVID, and he had a cold, and we're doing breathing treatments every 2 hours. So I was definitely like sleep deprived. But I absolutely had enough. Now, if I could like go back and tell Heather, like, don't get to that point, like stop it before it got there, I probably would have tried. But I think that it still took that day. Like it took me being like, no, we're done. Because I let so much of his feedback about me as a person affect me. Like it literally put me in a very dark place. So even now, like with college, I'm crazy. I am doing a dual major. Like I'm getting two bachelors at the same time. I don't know what I was thinking when I signed up for that, knowing that my workload, knowing I have kids, knowing I'm doing CASA. And I'm like, yeah, but I want to do something for me. So I'm dual majoring. And last night, like the professor gave me feedback on one of my papers, like deducted 2 points because he said that I didn't go into detail about something enough. And I just want to be, I'm like, Heather, it's okay. Like, you don't have to be perfect at everything. You're still going to get an A in this class. It's not that big of a deal. Like, learning to like really let the small things go. Like, I almost lost sleep over those 2 points. Like, first of all, you said 750 words and I wrote 820. How did I not go into, But like, it's still, if he didn't see it, that's okay. I still got plenty of more time to get my 4.0 GPA. Like, it is what it is. It's okay. It doesn't determine my worth, right?
Exactly that. And really, what a lot of people don't realize about the military, and I've explained this a lot, even when I was active duty and since then, is that our for the for the enlisted evaluation system, the way that it's set up, it judges your whole life.
Whole life.
Yeah. So it's not like, oh,
Okay.
it's like, oh, you're not exceeding expectations, right? So you're not the best NCO in the shop. That's not what we're saying. We're saying of all of the NCOs, you're not one of the better people. You don't have one of the better lives.
Right.
Like that's the way it comes across because
Like
there's so much
the
judgment.
yes, the
And you have,
feedback we give is so
yes,
personal. And
yes.
I was getting that every day. And
I
there was
cannot
no one
imagine.
above him there that I could talk to. There was no one else giving me feedback. So I absolutely took it as this is what I was worth.
And it's wild to me because I've been in your office a couple of times while you were there. Um, and just looking at the atmosphere, it seemed to me, from just sitting in the chair waiting to speak to someone, like this is a really cool place to work. Like everybody gets along. Like this, it's nice up here.
So my coworkers were amazing. They absolutely like the civilian that sat next to me and the captain that worked in that office. They were amazing. I think it's kind of like the camaraderie. Like we're all going through the suck together. We're all, we all work in this fast-paced office that nobody really knows if we're coming or we're going, but we're in this together. And so they were great. They were nice. And then like having people like you like come in and visit, it was like, oh, a new face to talk to. Hey, how's it going? Like new interactions. Yeah. If there was just like that one piece we could have taken out of it, like the negative feedback in the toxic work environment, if that would have not been there, it would have been manageable.
Wow.
But it was ingrained and it still is. So it's sad.
Well, you've been there so much, and I know, like I've had plenty of clients that I've talked to about this, where we know that you're resilient. We know that you're strong. We know that you fought battles. I have a friend that said, "I fight unwinnable battles and I win them," and I feel like that
Yeah,
describes you.
get
Um,
it.
but but I know that there are sometimes where you're just thinking, man, you know what? It would be nice if I didn't have to be strong today.
Yeah, and for like that's deep. Like there are so many times where like would just say like I don't want to have to be strong. I don't want to have to be resilient. I want things to just be easy. And I think like working through the depression and the suicidal tendencies, like I've really realized that there was so many things I was making into a battle that really they didn't have to be and they weren't. I almost like something as minute as last night, like the 2 point thing, like that doesn't have to be that big of a deal. It doesn't have to be a battle. It doesn't have to be a self like an internal why didn't you know like dialogue I have with myself. But I think of course like I look internal like was my life really that hard in those moments or was I making it harder on myself? But I can recognize some of those situations would have been hard for anyone. But
Yes.
I think now knowing my self-worth and loving myself and like seeing things as not that big of a deal or it doesn't have to be life altering, it doesn't have to waste 30 minutes of my time. Things have gotten easier. But also my thought process, right? Like I said in the last one, like when I can see myself going down the rabbit hole of being negative or letting something control me, I can pretty much be like, no, no, this isn't you. This is emotions, this is anger, this is whatever, but it's not who you are as a person. You can feel the feelings, but they're just feelings. It's not who you are as a person.
When you say that, you remind me of this book, and so I actually have it as a banner, and I'm gonna put it up there. Dr. Mark Brackett, he's amazing. You can look him up on YouTube. He started the Emotional Intelligence Center, I think at Princeton. Um, I think it's Yale. If he saw this, he'd probably be offended. But he wrote a book called Permission to Feel, and it really applies to you, to me, to people who judge ourselves because of our emotions, as if I should not be feeling this right now. And Dr. Brackett is saying, give yourself permission to feel that in the moment. Because when you allow yourself to feel that, even when it's feeling, whatever emotion bubbled up when you got a 98 instead of 100, like it's okay. It's okay that you felt that way. Like give yourself permission to feel that. But what you said earlier was you look at why you feel that way. See, when you give yourself permission to feel, then you can let the emotion do what it's supposed to do. And then you can look at why did I feel that? Was that emotion appropriate? How can I manage this in the future? And then you can continue to grow emotionally. And for you, I mean that's what you've done a million times over.
Yeah.
And you've gotten to the point where, and this is what I think about with you is when you look at giving yourself permission to feel, looking at why do you feel that way? What can you do about those emotions? And none of those answers have anything to do with your self-worth and value because that doesn't change.
Right. That was like a turning point. Like let myself feel this. Give myself the grace to understand like this is a reaction and it's okay. But it doesn't mean anything for me as Heather is still the same even if she gets hurt. Right? She's still the same if she's angry. She's still the same if other people don't see it and I'm upset. It's upset. I'm genuinely I'm still who I am. I'm still Heather, the perfectionist who's going to get a 4.0 GPA, even though the professor decided to take away 2 points. I'm not a less than student, right? Yeah.
Well,
I,
so I
I
have a
was telling
question.
my friend, and she was like, "Are you really upset about the 2 points? Like all the things that you take on, and you're upset that you're dual majoring, and you did." And I'm like, you know what? Don't no. Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Wow. What I'm thinking, right? This is what I want to kind of get into. I want to switch gears here.
Okay.
So So you're dual major, tech sergeant, mother of two, wife, casa. When things work out how they're supposed to,
Yes.
you get your degrees. Kids are healthy, they're happy. You continue to grow into who you are, your love of yourself, love of your life. What does that look like for you? What does that look like when things are how they're supposed to be?
You know, I don't know like of a perfect situation, right? I don't know where it's going to be like Dr. Heather Gotti because I definitely don't want my doctorate. Um, but I would look back and I would just, it's almost like a sigh. Like it was so worth it. Like just content and happy with all the struggles and all the things that I put on my own plate. Like it made this, in this moment, it was so worth it. And even though like I don't have my degrees and like my kids still stress me out, like I can still say that even now though. Like this is worth it. It was worth the pain. It was worth the fight. It like look how full I feel compared to how empty I was 8 to 10 months ago, right? A year ago. Like man, this it was worth fighting for myself. It was worth it's going to be worth it when I have the degrees. I don't know what I'm going to use the degrees for, but it's going to be so worth it to say that I have them and I'm done, right?
Right, right. You say that, and I think about there's so much conversation nowadays about is going to college worth it and this and that, and it's talking about what can you do with the degree as a tool, but in reality, the growth, the journey, the learning of getting that degree, that's where the real value
The
is.
consistency because it's not a quick thing. I wish it was, but you can't make it come any faster. Like you have to do all the classes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a question for you though. So getting a 98, you I don't know, maybe you feel like that kind of sucked. But my question for you is if that sucked, how do you celebrate the hundreds? How do you give yourself credit for those?
I don't. I'm like, yep, good job. Now next assignment, right? Like I probably could do better at appreciating the things that I think meet my own standards. Because I'm almost like, I, it's a very controversial movie, Turning Red. But like how the mother's like, everything must be perfect. And it's not good job, it's perfect. That's the expectation. That's kind of how I am with myself. Just probably not healthy, but I don't let it be toxic. So I just have high standards for myself because I know what I'm capable of. I know that I can do it. When I first talked about dual majoring with my supervisor, I'm like, "Do you think I'm crazy?" She was like, "Yes, but I know if anyone can do it, it's you." And I'm like, "Yeah, it is." Like now I'm ready. Now, that's the pep talk I needed. I
Yes,
can do
I
it.
love it. And I love that you hold yourself to a higher standard, right?
Right.
Because really what we do in life is we meet our standards, whatever they are, right? So if you want to live better, you have to elevate your standards. I want to add though that part of meeting your standards, of course, is the giving yourself credit and celebrating. And so, and part of elevating your happiness is savoring the wins, And so it doesn't have to be big, but you can just think
Yeah.
about how do I celebrate? How do I show myself gratitude for the work that I put in so that what I did yesterday, today, and tomorrow align with my long-term goals? And when you do that, you give yourself credit, and it could be something small. It could be something like we're gonna spend extra time, playing video games with the kids. We're gonna watch a movie together. We're gonna go to a park, or just by yourself. I'm gonna go get an extra slice of pizza, or I'm going to I'm gonna start a new series. It could be as big or small as you want, but it's the full embodiment of celebrating your victories because your victories are aligning with the standards you have for yourself. And so you have to acknowledge that, savor those moments. And when I say savor those moments, understand, I don't just make stuff up, right? And so that's part of what Dr. Laurie Santos teaches. and she created this course called the Science of Well-being, which is the most attended course in the history of Yale University. So,
Oh,
so when she says savor the wins and savor the moment, savor the happiness, I believe her, and that's why I pass it on, because you have had a lots of wins, but because of your standards, they don't all feel like wins. And I'm gonna say this to you. I'm gonna say this to you. I'm gonna hit you with this one.
great.
And I thought of this because I see him behind you living life, and and
Bye. Bye.
when when he accomplishes his goals, do you want him to celebrate?
Yes.
Yes, set the example.
You will. I should set the example. I definitely set the example, and it bites me in the butt sometimes because like my Amazon cart is full of random small things that I like put in the diaper bag where I'm like, hey, can you just work harder today at your letters at school and I'll get you a prize. And then he doesn't know that I have like a bag full of things that I just want to give him. So I'm looking for something to celebrate for him. Jeez, kid. Okay, go change. There was tag in the other underwear, if you're wondering what just transpired.
I wasn't wondering, but thank you.
You're welcome.
Man, yeah, I just feel like you've been through so much and you're such an example. And as we give respect and honor to your strength and resilience of your past, starting from whatever age you experienced the first bad thing, as we give honor and respect to that, I want to make sure that we give honor and respect to your wins, honor and respect to your effort, to your journey, to your just continued fight just to be the best you. And so I really feel like, I mean, you're a champion. You're amazing. You're a winner. And between the two of us, I should not be the only one that recognizes
Okay, fine. I
that.
agree.
Oh,
I can
man.
agree.
I'm so grateful for this part two. It's really powerful. I'm moderating it. This is my podcast, but at the same time, I'm a student of your life, and I learn. I definitely learn from you the things you've been through, even when it comes to raising standards, even when it comes to being resilient, even when you don't want to be, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm so grateful for you. And I want to know if you just have any last words, a message for someone that maybe is struggling to raise their standards.
You are worth it. You're worth the work. You're worth the resiliency. You're worth it. You owe it to yourself because you're worth it, not because of other people's standards or lack of standards for you, but like you're worth it to give it to yourself.
Thank you. I love it. I love it. Yeah, and so if someone's watching this and they didn't memorize it and they only take one thing away from it, what Heather said is you are worth it.
You are worth it.
Thank you so much. I'm going to wrap this up. I appreciate you. Appreciate everyone that tuned in and everyone that's going to watch on the replay. And thank you so much, Heather. And I'll
Thank you.
see everyone later.
Bye.